Let's do some unit conversion problems that involve squared and cubed conversion factors. These arise when the units that you start with are squared or cubed. Now, we're only going to go as far as squared and cubed factors here, but the same method would work going farther with powers raised to the fourth or fifth or whatever. But generally, squared and cubed factors are good enough. Our first example of this is determining the area of a desk. And this is a desk that's 0.92 meters by 1.87 meters. I'm making an assumption here that it's rectangular. It doesn't say that, but most desks are. And that you know that the area of a desk would be its width times its length, or vice versa. Doesn't matter what order you multiply them in. So we want to find the area in millimeters squared. The way we set this up, we would go, the area is equal to 0.92 m for meters, multiply that by 1.87 meters, and when you do that, you would get 1.7 meters squared. Now, the way I'm doing it is to take that 1.7 meters squared and convert it into millimeters. You could also have separately converted the 0.92 meters into millimeters and the 1.87 meters into millimeters and then multiplied those together. I'm doing it this way because I want to show you how you convert a squared unit into a different unit. So now we have the 1.7 meters squared. To get to millimeters, we need to know that 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters. And so there's our equality. We want to convert that into a conversion factor. Those two things are equal, so one of them divided by the other is 1, and I'll multiply by that. Now, in that area, I effectively have meters squared on top of a fraction. I could imagine here that I've got a 1 on the bottom there. I don't need to have that, but I could imagine that it's there, and then in my conversion factor I would want to have the meters on the bottom of a fraction. Well, I don't need this, I just kind of realize it's there, and I'll multiply this by 1,000 millimeters. So there's my conversion factor, my funny looking 1. Now if I just multiply it by that, I'm going to have a problem, and that will happen when I divide the meters squared by the meters down here, because meters squared divided by meters, m squared over m, is just meters. I won't have completely gotten rid of the meters. What I need to do is, I could multiply by that factor again a second time, but if you know algebra, you can square it. And when you square a parentheses, the meter on the bottom, I could think of that as 1 meter, would get squared, and so it would divide out with that meter that's up here. And that's what I'll do. Now, I don't actually explicitly write it out as squaring everything inside, but when you have parentheses like that and you square them, you square the 1,000, you'll square the millimeters, you square the 1, and you square the meters. Squaring a 1 doesn't do anything, you still get 1. Squaring a meter gives me meters squared, and I've got meters squared on top, meters squared on the bottom. Those will divide out. And the units I'll be left with are millimeters squared, and the way we write that is mm squared. And it's understood the first m refers to milli, the second refers to meters, so it's a millimeter squared. Okay. Well, if we multiply all of that stuff out, we get a fairly big number there. We'll actually end up with 1.7 times 10 to the 6th millimeters squared. And because I've got my calculator set to be in scientific notation, it automatically gave me that 10 to the 6th millimeters squared there. If you were to do it and you didn't have your calculator that way, you might get something like 1,700, 000, and of course that would be millimeters squared. I just happen to have my calculator set to do that. And I had to write less than you did by being able to write times 10 to the 6th. So there are uses for scientific notation. Let's try another one. I once had a car with an engine that was referred to as a 318 V8. And that's referring to something called the displacement of the engine. And it was understood that that 318 was cubic inches. American cars used to be, the displacements used to be measured in cubic inches. Nowadays it's more common to hear cubic centimeters. So what was the displacement of that engine in cubic centimeters? Let's see if we can figure that out. Well, we're actually starting with the displacement equaling 318 inches cubed. That's the way you would write that. If you're wondering what displacement means, you can look that up on Wikipedia sometime. I want to convert that to cubic centimeters. I need some kind of a conversion between inches and centimeters. And it so happens that nowadays the inch is defined to be exactly 2.54 centimeters. And so that's what I'll use. The displacement as I have it written effectively has the inches cubed, or the inches, on top. And so in my conversion factor, I'll want the inches on the bottom. And I'll put the 2.54 centimeters on top. Okay. Now I look at that, and if I just consider the inches, I've got them on top when I start, and then I'd have inches cubed up there, and I've got inches on the bottom in my conversion factor. I won't get rid of those cubed inches. I'll still have inches squared. And so I need to fix my conversion factor. And the way I do that is I need inches cubed. I cube the conversion factor. When I cube those parentheses, I get 2.54 squared, centimeters squared, or 2.54 cubed, centimeters cubed, 1 cubed, and inches cubed. By the way, what I've got in parentheses there, because 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, what's inside the parentheses is just 1. No units, no nothing, it's just 1. And when you cube 1, you still get 1. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, so I'm multiplying that through there. This is actually a multiplication problem now. And when I do that, I'm going to erase this over here because I want the room to write. I will get 5,210 centimeters cubed. So that car that I had, which was a Plymouth Valiant with that 318 V8 in there, had an engine with a displacement that's fairly large by today's standards. At least you don't typically see relatively small cars with engines that large in them anymore. Here's one that I dreamt up while I was working on a home improvement project where I was painting a room. I had a gallon of paint, and on the side of the paint can it said that 1 gallon would cover 350 square feet. And when I saw that, I had plenty of paint for the room, but I just got to thinking what they might say in a country that used the metric system. And I'm guessing, haven't bought any paint in a country that uses the metric system, but I'm guessing it would probably say how many square meters would be covered with 1 liter of paint. So let's see if we can figure that out. We start off with 350 feet squared per gallon. And I want to convert that into some number of meters squared per liter. A couple of things that I'm going to need for this I need to know that 1 meter is equal to 3.28 feet, about, and 1 gallon is equal to 3.785 liters, and I'm going to use a capital L to stand for liter. That's the accepted metric system abbreviation, or one of them. All right, so there I have it. Now I look at my initial expression there, 350 feet squared over 1 gallon, and when I multiply by a conversion factor involving these two things, I need to have the feet on the bottom. And so I'll put the 3.28 feet down there. Don't know what happened to that line. And I'll put 1 meter on top. But by itself that won't work because I've got feet squared on top and just feet on the bottom. So I need to square this factor. Okay, then I've got gallons on the bottom, and I don't want gallons, I want liters on the bottom, so I'll put 1 gallon here, and I've got 3.785 liters there on the bottom. And I don't have to square that one because the gallon is not squared. So one of my conversion factors I square, the other one I don't. Okay, let's just look at the units here for a minute. Feet squared on top here. I've got feet on the bottom there, but they're in a parentheses, which is going to get squared, so they'll become squared. So the feet squared here will cancel the feet squared on that bottom. Similarly, on the bottom here I've got gallons. On the top of here I've got gallons. Those will divide out. And unit-wise, I'll be left with meters squared, and on top, and liters on the bottom. So I just need to do the arithmetic here, and I get 8.6 meters squared per liter. And I'm keeping just 2 significant figures here because I only have 2 for sure in the 350. So there's another one. That was kind of an interesting one. We'll do one more here. This is one that I've had problems very similar to this one that some of my advanced students wrote incorrectly, partly because they weren't using the method correctly, and they were just trying to do things in their head. So something like this is something to be careful of. But let's figure out how many cubic millimeters there are in 5.6 meters cubed, the correct way. So I start off with 5.6 meters cubed, and I want to convert that into millimeters cubed. Something I need to know is that 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters. And for this problem, it's going to be easier to write that as 10 to the 3rd millimeters. A little shorthand notation there. So I'll multiply by a funny looking 1. Meters on top here, I want them on the bottom here. And I'll put my 1,000 millimeters on top. Okay, now the contents of those parentheses are equal to 1. That's just a 1, a funny looking one. But I've got meters cubed on top on the outside, meters on the bottom on the inside. Those won't divide out unless I cube the entire parentheses. Oops, I wrote that as 1,000. I wanted to write that as 10 to the 3rd. Let's see, now I can see the meters cubed here will divide with meters cubed there. So they're going to be gone. I'll end up with 5.6 times 10 to the 3rd cubed. When you raise a power to a power, you multiply the exponents. 3 times 3 is 9. So that'll be 10 to the 9th. And my units will be millimeters cubed. That's the way we write those units cubed. Okay, that's 5.6 billion millimeters cubed. 10 to the ninth is a billion. What students often do is they think, okay, there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter, so 5.6 meters cubed must be 5.6 thousand millimeters cubed. But that's not the way it works out, and you have to do it carefully and correctly. Well, I hope these problems helped, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about this and you'll be adept enough at this to do these types of conversions correctly.